Hi, my name's Paul Callens. I'm your host of What's Up with the Sun. What's Up with the Sun? Now, I'm going to watch the movie and give my commentary. The first thing you see here is a massive solar flare. This is actual raw footage of a very recent event that was captured by NASA. There is a lot more satellites studying the sun right now, and we're gathering a lot more information and footage about what's happening with the sun. Science knows something's up with the sun, but they're not telling us, and the news media is not paying attention to it yet. So the purpose of this site is to try to generate some interest in sharing with us more of this new information they're gathering about the sun and these huge solar flares that are occurring. This solar flare you see in this first segment is larger than the planet Jupiter. We're talking much larger than the Earth. We're talking about this massive tsunami of charged particles that could hit the Earth and knock out power. Like a huge tsunami, it's just going to engulf the Earth. So that's some beautiful footage we're seeing of an actual solar flare. Now, this movie is about this true story being centered, but there's also a theme in here about the evolution of human consciousness and the idea that the sun is governing our consciousness, and that these cycles that are peaking are also causing a peak in evolution of human consciousness, and yet there's a duality. Like so much of human existence, it's a struggle of concepts of duality, conflict. And so we have images of ourselves separate and separated, man and woman, those that know and those that don't know. And what we're talking about here is censorship that's trying to block the evolution of human consciousness. So a theme throughout this movie is the evolution of human consciousness. And so you see a lot of images about dualism, man and woman coming together, split. There's also a lot of imagery going on about the solar flare, which is depicted in my calendar as a tongue, giant tongue sticking out. So in these opening sequences, it's sort of a dream sequence where the question in the theme of evolution of human consciousness is what's real and what's not real. Is this the dream or is this the reality? And what did the Mayans know about this? They spoke a lot, not just about physical changes, but about the evolution of consciousness. So the character waking up to his self-awareness, crawling, this naked life form crawling out of the ocean. I also call that segment Full Moon Rising over La Manzanilla. Okay. So, in continuing this theme, we have illumination, and we have him grabbing a camera, which represents this concept that we have an ability to visualize ourselves outside of ourselves, to be the observer of ourselves. Now suddenly, his paradigm is blown wide open. In the first moments, you see his consciousness, his focus is solely on this duality of man and woman, the titillation of the attraction between man and woman, and suddenly she hands him the apple, if you will. If I were producing this movie for real, I'd get Apple to do a product placement on the computer, because she presents him the knowledge that suddenly shifts his attention to something altogether. This story, ice on the sun, how could that be possible? And you'll see he loses all of his interest in her, which then she's spurned, and it sets a whole conflict up between them. Again, the concept of separation and duality. So the spark of knowledge comes in the form of this story, and he's hungry for more. And now he's lost in this whole other level of evolution of consciousness that we've created through the internet and the sharing of all this information. At the same time, you've created this tool that can be so useful in evolving consciousness. It's also a tool that runs through the NSA, the National Security Agency. It was created by the Pentagon, this internet. So it's also a massive tool to control consciousness at the same time. Very true. This original story, that exact headline, was on Google Mexico. I saw it one night with my own eyes, and the next morning it was gone. So here she is, drinking her alcohol, trying to numb her consciousness. Here he is, smoking his pot, trying to open his consciousness. Throughout the history of humanity, people are always trying to escape or change the perspective of their consciousness. Another method that humanity has always used to try to expand its consciousness and gain a different perspective is meditation. So we see him meditate, we see the sunrise, another metaphor, this awakening, the enlightenment. But sometimes, quite often actually, when people have enlightening experiences, they go a little crazy for a while, trying to integrate this new perspective. And so he wakes her up all crazed with his new perspective, and she just can't even go there. Even though she saw it with her own eyes, she doesn't want to take it in and integrate it. And he's having a hard time taking it and integrating it. And that's one of the great concerns I have about the changes that we're going through right now. As people's minds are blown, as these changes continue to accelerate, I think a lot of people are going to have a hard time dealing with it unless we gradually integrate this knowledge. So it comes down to the basic human dynamics again. Once again, the journey of the evolution of human consciousness goes on a detour yet again between the conflicts of our perception of duality, the separation of man and woman, and the desire for those two forces to come back, and the conflict that inherently seems to happen again and again. So she leaves.
Hey, Peter, did I wake you? Hey,
John.
did you check your emails yet?
God, what time is it?
It's here and now, bro. Check your email. I sent you some wild shit last night.
Hold on.
Man, it was a fluke, a glitch in a cover-up. But there's no coincidences, right? I saw something incredible last night that never ran in the States. It points straight to your black secret theory about them not confirming 2012.
Where? Are you still in Mexico?
Yeah, and I'm not coming back either. Now you need to get out of there too, bro. There's no peace for guys like us in Dick Cheney's America.
And no peace for the peace activists.
Yeah, don't you mean terrorist sympathizers?
Whatever. I got no emails from you, bro.
You're kidding. I sent you several things late last night.
I didn't get anything.
Oh my god. It's a total system filter. They've completely censored it. Peter, the sun is not hot.
Well, it was yesterday.
Then why is it freezing cold in space, man? How come comets, which are ice, do not melt when they fly through the
Now,
edges
the
of
things
the
he's
sun?
quoting in here are absolutely true. The comets have been observed flying through the edges of the sun, not melting, not changing their trajectory. I very much intentionally set it up that John looks quite crazy in this because I knew that I was going to look pretty crazy myself, and probably do, talking about all this, but now that there's actual current science, we're talking about 2011 science, current news, this NOAA announcement, the NOAA director confirming my conclusions, I'm finally ready to talk about this. But in this movie, I very much set it up to make John look crazy so that we could then ask the question, is he really crazy? As I said, this movie was written to be the first 10 minutes of a feature film, and I've simply tagged on all that verbiage at the end of it to try to bring you up to speed on what the message of the feature of the film would have been. Again, we've got metaphors going on here. This carnivore program, which eats up all your computers and programs and files, actually existed. It's an actual Pentagon program. This scene where he inserts his battery into his cell phone is very important. That's also used by governments around the world. We think about all these repressive regimes, but this technology was just developed in the United States to be able to monitor not just your cell phone calls, but to actually use your cell phone as a microphone to monitor the entire room and conversations going on in that room wherever you are, identifying exactly where you are. The metaphor here is that, well, there's an obvious metaphor that's about to occur with the crocodiles, but the image of him hacking the coconuts representing this, well, that's pretty self-evident that they represent his head being chopped off, but the spilling of the coconut milk, the spilling of the blood, the hacking into, it's all a metaphor that leads up to this guy hacking his head off. Like the movie, I'm also setting up the whole excuse that it could be the drug war and his pot smoking that led him to being hacked up and disappear off the face of the earth. But that's another story. Right now I added all this text to try to bring you up to speed on what the feature-length film would have shared. But it also works in this concept of the evolution of human consciousness. In the beginning of our short movie here, we have this dream state. What's real, what's illusion? Then we wake up and we crawl out of the earth and we're driven by very simple urges, the urge to have sex. And then suddenly there's some spark of enlightenment, some introduction of new knowledge that opens our eyes and sets our character John here on a path he can't turn back from, which is to look further and further into this information and get more and more curious and have a further state of enlightenment that changes perspective forever. So we start out with a very simple level of consciousness, an awakening experience, and then by the end of the movie we're just inundated with all this information, more than we could possibly read all at once, which is not necessarily good filmmaking, but I wanted to get it out there anyway because I don't really expect to make this feature movie. Now if anybody out there wants to produce a feature film, I've got a great script for you. It's the murder mystery of What Became of John. Eisenhower's message speaks for itself. I mean, that's actually gives credibility to everything I'm saying here. I would imagine that if I were to come upon this on YouTube, I would think this guy, me, is a crazy nut. But when you put it in perspective of Eisenhower, the guy that helped create black secrecy in order to develop the atomic bomb in World War II, which he led as the general of the, this guy is as deeply involved in Pentagon secrecy as anybody can be. And in the final days of his presidency, he warned the American public that the Pentagon was out of control, the military-industrial complex was out of control, that science was going to be censored and controlled for the sake of people profiting. Okay, it's time to give all that up. The 2012 prophecies are one way that we think about 2012. People are going to be talking a lot about 2012 in terms of presidential politics very soon. We need to make this a campaign issue in the United States. What are we going to do about repealing the laws that allow black secrecy to exist so that we can wake up in time to deal with the coming 2012-13 blackout? So this is my short film, Yellow and El Sol, based on a true story, fictionalized to make a point about the evolution of human consciousness, full of metaphors, the waves constantly in the background, the cycles of the sun, the cycles of human behavior. So please, help us break this cycle. We can't repeat this. If the Mayans went to so much trouble to carve in rock the knowledge that we need to be ready for this event to occur, let's do the same for the next epoch of time, the coming fifth sun. Now my theory is that the Mayans talk about this being the fifth sun because, well, I'm getting off topic. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for that information and more. Thank you.